Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the recap and review of NCIS Season 17, Episode 4, Someone Else's Shoes. So we start out at Arlington National Cemetery and then accidentally wander onto the set of Saw apparently, because then a horse just gallops in carrying 2 severed feet. We then cut to Torres, McGee, and Bishop, who are all serving hard time in the evidence garage. They're sorting through evidence and come across this talking haunted clown doll. I feel like maybe we should have investigated that further, but I digress. We also meet Terry, their omnipotent and somewhat terrifying supervisor. Terry brings them a box of evidence. This box just so happens to contain all the prepaid cell phones that were in the car that Gibbs and Ziva stole. Luckily, they're sprung from the garage and head over to the crime scene. Once we're there, Palmer pulls a dog tag out of the foot belonging to Sergeant Holtzman. Back at NCIS, Casey is able to confirm that the feet do indeed belong to Sergeant Holtzman and he was being treated for severe diabetes. Bishop and Torres head over to a VA medical center and they encounter a doctor who talks about the imperfections in the system and how they're all waiting on a funding bill to get through Congress. She's also able to tell them that Sergeant Holtzman was homeless. Gibbs and McGee then head over to an abandoned bus station, which is now occupied by homeless vets and a Mercy Point mobile care truck. They also encounter an activist who's walking around with a Mercy Point volunteer and she's trying to get truth bombs for her podcast. She also tries to expose NCIS, but McGee and Gibbs are obviously like, no thank you. They then meet a man by the name of Barney Williams, who says that he lives here and confirms that the sergeant lived here as well. While they're investigating around the station, they find not only the sergeant's body, but also the body of a woman who was missing her hands. In autopsy, Jimmy figures out that Holtzman died of a heart attack, making it desecration, not murder. The woman, however, was murdered by a toaster. Gibbs and Jimmy decide that whoever is doing this is someone with a purpose. Sloan, meanwhile, talks to Barney and figures out that he's a Marine. And although he talks to other vets and tells their stories, he won't tell his own. In her lab, Casey is able to track down where the horse came from because he was microchipped. McGee is infuriating in this scene because he stole my horse joke. Not only are they able to decipher where the horse came from, but they're also able to figure out that its name is No Sprinkles. Unique. So they bring in horse owner and animal naming extraordinaire Henry Haas. In interrogation, they start to accuse him and Sam Elliott yells at them for even thinking such a thing. He says that No Sprinkles was stolen and hands over a list of everyone that had keys to the barn. McGee and Torres head back to the medical center and at this point the case is all over social media. There's been a lot of finger pointing and the center has started getting death threats and now the doctor is concerned. She then opens up a cabinet and we see a literal severed hand pointing a finger. So now not only do we know that the culprit has a purpose, but also that he's very subtle. Back in the squad room, the team has to go their separate ways again because Sloan needs a second pair of eyes and Terry needs friends. Sloan tells Gibbs that while Barney was serving, his mother got sick and he had to take an emergency leave. Unfortunately, she died and he was left with nothing and no one. They head back to the bus station and see that Barney is the newest person to be attacked. Whoever the attacker is knows that Barney's been talking to NCIS, so Gibbs decides to stay overnight at the camp. Back in the garage, McGee and Torres and Bishop are kind of bickering, and at one point Torres turns to Bishop and says, "Well, what do you want me to say?" And then from the depths of hell, the clown jumps in and says, "I love you and I'm sorry," which is convenient and terrifying. Back at the site, Barney reveals to Gibbs that while he was away tending to his mom, his team was attacked and a lot of them didn't make it back. He says that he felt so guilty that he couldn't save his mom or his team that he thought about ending it all once he got back. Gibbs says that he felt similar feelings, and the reason that he's still sitting there is because a friend reminded him that he deserved to exist. They then hear a noise and they chase someone out of the bushes, only to find out that it's the woman from the podcast. Back in the squad room, McGee, Torres, and Bishop all watch as the funding bill passes through Congress and start to wonder if the doctor has an alibi. They bring the doctor into interrogation and she says that not only does she hate horses, but she also wouldn't personally benefit from this bill passing. Someone who would personally benefit, however, is Mercy Point Mobile Care. And it turns out the volunteer they spoke to earlier is actually Kyle Freeman, whose family owns the company. The next morning, several vets walk over to Gibbs and they introduce themselves and they compliment his shiny hair that glows in the moonlight. And when Gibbs gets a text saying that Kyle is responsible, the vets say they have his 6. Gibbs confronts Kyle and he tries to make a break for it, but he's surrounded on all sides by the veterans who announce themselves by name, including Lance Corporal Barney Williams, who knocks Kyle out cold. The video of the confrontation goes viral, and Bishop says that Gibbs is an influencer now. I guess that's why his hair is so shiny. It's all that sugar bear hair he promotes. Gibbs and Sloan then head back to the site and hand out the prepaid cell phones from earlier to all the veterans. The woman from the podcast was inspired by hearing Gibbs and Barney talk, and now she's created a platform for other veterans to tell their stories, including Barney, who now wants to share his story with the world. And that is Someone Else's Shoes. There are a lot of really great things about this episode, but the first thing I want to talk about is those phones. There was a shot towards the end of Out of the Darkness which very clearly shows Ziva putting a used phone back into the box, which means that either someone intercepted it at NCIS or one of the veterans now just has like a crucial piece of evidence on their hands. I was so confident that this was gonna get brought up that I kind of like half expected one of the veterans to be like, I just got a text from Tony. I feel like that has to get brought up again at some point. Someone has that phone now, and I just need to know who. Vance was the one that approved the cell phones being handed out. Like maybe he intercepted it, or Gibbs. I don't know if someone is gonna call them and be like, hey, this cell phone you gave me is mega shady. Because I think she texted Odette with it. And maybe Tony, who knows? In my head, I feel like that shot was just way too specific and intentional for that phone thing to just be like swept under the rug. On a different note, I really enjoyed like the little baby Slibs moment where she hands Gibbs her glasses to see. It's so small, I just thought it was so cute. So there was really nothing happening on the Slibs front, which is why I was very surprised when Ella came and like slapped me in the face. That moment where Torres is like, well, what do you want me to say? And then the demon clown is like, I'm sorry and I love you, was a lot. Like it was just a lot to me. Maybe Ziva and the clown are in cahoots, who knows? I just really want to see Torres and Bishop talk. It doesn't have to be a romantic thing. It literally can just be about their friendship, like their relationship as friends, just because I feel like it's not on spectacular terms right now. Again, I think there's just this like lingering tension that I think they need to work through before anything else happens. And then on a whole, I just really loved Gibbs this episode. I'll say it 1,000,001 times. I love the evolution that he's been going through since last season. Especially that moment with Barney was just so vulnerable and honest and touching, and I really loved it. Not only do I love to see how Gibbs is moving forward, but I also like when he uses that to touch on moments from his past. I just really liked it. Speaking of this evolution, I think Dr. Grace is back next episode. We love Dr. Grace. I'm really intrigued to see what she has to say about his progress, because last time she saw him, he was in like a not good place. Now that he's had like the whole Ziva thing to deal with, like that was a big moment. I think that whole conversation would be really important and interesting. This also might be an opportunity to get into some more like Slibs territory, because there was that moment last season where Sloan was talking to Grace and she was like, there's this person who I like, but they might not like me back. I think Grace is gonna be like, Gibbs also has new neighbors, which makes sense. I imagine the others maybe grew tired of the monthly shootouts, which is fair. I think it's a little boy and his mom who move in, and I love to see Gibbs interact with children. I think that's always a really fun dynamic, but I am a little fearful that there's like a child living next to this like Target now. That's concerning. I think after this upcoming episode there's a break, and then we get a Casey-centric episode, which is really exciting. I really do think the phone might be reincorporated at some point throughout the season. I may look back on this and be like, wow, you were simply wrong. But I don't know. Again, that shot of her putting it back in the box feels way too intentional for them to not come back to it. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the whole episode, and I will see you guys for the recap and review of Wide Awake.